Perhaps we need some outside universal threat to make us recognize this common bound. I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
Good evening and welcome to the Friday night edition of Spaced Out Radio Tonight. My name is Dave Scott. We always enjoy you tuning us in as we finish off the week strong with Heather Arnold. She will be talking about the giants of Aruba. Yes, I've already looked at pictures of Aruba. Lots of sharks there. Not going. She can have the sharks. Her boyfriend just about got killed by a tiger shark like a couple of weeks ago. So, yeah. Looks beautiful. But we're going to find out about the Giants there momentarily. But first, we got to say hello to each and every one of you in our YouTube land, including Race Fan in the gold medal position, Kitty Cattywhack with the silver, SJ with a bronze medal tonight. Paramarv, how you doing? Robert Lamoth, Hippie Deidre, how are you? Frankie B and Lightwalkers, nice to see you guys. Hi there, Ethanol, Road Flare, and Mama Catherine. I love you, Mama Catherine. I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful day. And I know you have a special guest with you tonight. Yes, you do. Where is little Ava? Little Ava, a little smooch for you, my dear. Love you. And Uncle Dave sends you a big, big hug. Yes, he does. I hope you enjoy tonight's show, both of you. Scrolling on down, let us say hello to Eternity Eternal, Karen in the Woo Train. Mark is here. Mark will be signing autographs after the show. Line up to the left of the studio if you don't mind. To the left of the studio. Necessary Dialogue. Kitty Cattywhack, how are you? Barb Madison and Stephanie Kenny Blankenship, nice to see you. Flubber Lane is here. Flubber Lane will be signing autographs after the show as well. Line up to the right of the studio if you don't mind. To the right of the studio. Ethanol, how are you again? Lee the Bee, thank you for coming on in as we scroll on down. JMJ12, good to see you. Mel WD40 is here lubing us up for tonight's show because when you're speaking Giants, you always want to be nice and lube just in case. Yeah, just in case. Thanks for the lube, Mel. We appreciate you. Just another guy named Harry. Thanks for coming on in as we continue on with our roll call. Walter, how you doing, my friend? And number 75 in your program, starting in goal tonight from Stockholm, Sweden, Lars Jansson. How you doing? Millennium, my man. Cosmic Joe, Brad Ford, J Truthseeker. Nice to see you all here. Phineas over on X. How you guys doing? Good to see you. Where are we here? Algaray over on Twitch. 1,200 push-ups in 7 minutes. Giant arms tonight. Giant arms. Yeah, he's jacked. Lunch Money, welcome to SOR chat as we continue on with our roll call. Who is next here? Jerry Carter, CS, Pam Harris, Jeremy Jones. Good to have you all here. Summerside of Life, Carol Mario, how are you both? Nice to see you. Over on X, we have I'm Hardcore. Yes, SOR is a shark-free zone. True, very true. Digger Dog, nice to have you here. Fapster, good to see you. Hi, Christine Lynn. And let's see here. Scrolling on down. Major Lee, good morning to you. And T-Bone, my man, how's it going? And Steph Dickey, welcome back. Scrolling on down, who's next? Lots of conversation I got to go through. Tim Mothman and his goatee, two separate entities. Jed Maxwell, welcome to SOR Chat. Good to have you here. If you're new here, don't forget to hit subscribe, ring that bell. Paul Demon, are we being normal today? Please let me know. Appreciate it. Lenda, thank you for joining us. The Eric Andreas Unexplained, how are you? And let's see here. We got to get the radio side going. Hey, Cool Arrow, how are you? Hello and welcome to the radio and podcast side of Spaced Out Radio tonight. My name is Dave Scott. We're going to have a great show talking about the giants of Aruba. Heather Arnold is here to discuss all of her research. We are in roll call on our YouTube side right now saying hello to everyone. So if you ever want me to say hello and you're listening in, come to our YouTube. Yeah, because it's a lot of fun there. It really is. As we scroll on down here and we say hi to Jessica S. Leacham, how you doing? Babylon Rose, nice to see you. And we are caught up. Reminder to everybody, the super chat is open. It's a wonderful way to support what we do on this show on a nightly basis. And don't forget, you can shop at our Spaced Out Radio store. We do not have ugly swag, people. No ugly swag. Throw those horns up. Let's rock. Of Central British Columbia to you listening around the world. This, my friends, is Spaced Out Radio. I am your host, Dave Scott, sitting in the captain's chair of SOR headquarters. We welcome you to tonight's show on our terrestrial affiliates around North America, digitally on every major podcast network. Our website, spacedoutradio.com. We have a plethora of features for you. Rock out the Bumblefoot, read the News Wire, check out our site as well. You can follow us on X at Spaced Out Radio, Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show, and on Patreon and the Space Travelers Club. Tonight's show is brought to you by Chive Charities. Help make the world 10% happier by visiting Chive Charities today. You can find them on our website. We're heading to the Caribbean for tonight's show, physically and mentally. I wish physically. Man, could I use a vacation. Yes, we're going to talk about the giants of Aruba. Heather Arnold is here. We'll get her joining here momentarily to talk all about this amazingly cool subject. Then in hour number 3, Swamp Dweller will kick things off. Tim James and Lee Strauss happen to have dates tonight, separately, not together. So Terry Hall will be filling in for the UFO Encrypted Report. We're going to shoot the breeze with him on all the big subjects of the day. So let's get right to it. For 17 years, Heather Arnold has been studying the archaeological record, uncovering evidence of ancient races of giants who inhabited the Caribbean islands of Aruba, Bonaire, and Curaçao nearly 7,000 years ago. When Heather moved from the island of Manhattan to the island of Aruba to start her own tour company, her quest to provide historically accurate tours for her clients led her down a path of research shrouded by mystery. Oh, if this doesn't sound exciting, I don't know what is. I'm looking forward to this one. Through extensive investigations, field expeditions, explorations, and interviews, Heather determined that the true, rich history of the islands of Aruba, Bonaire, and Curaçao had been systematically repressed and vehemently denied. Looking on old maps, Heather noticed the island's original names were not as they are today, but instead were called the Island of the Giants, and the name after the giant race of people with elongated skulls who inhabited them. After 17 years of exhaustive study, translation, and interpretation of many scientific research papers, peer-reviewed journal articles, and field notes, it can be shown that the existence of giants is real, and their story is now just beginning to unfold. Wow, I love giants. There's something to this. Let's bring in Heather Arnold now. Heather, I want to say thank you so much for coming on Spaced Out Radio for the first time. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing well, Dave. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the invitation.
Well, we're lucky to have you here. We really are, because we don't talk enough about giants. And yet these are legends and mysteries that have popped up all around the world. Heck, even in North America here where I am in British Columbia. I mean, many people believe that in the Pacific Northwest that Sasquatch are a form of giant people. I mean, there's a lot of this going around, the giants of Kandahar, the giants of the South America are said to be there. I mean, we cannot seem to shake this story of giants. Now, in your bio, you grew up in Manhattan, moved to Aruba, not once, but twice. How did this all begin for you?
Yes, great question. So I came here on vacation and into Aruba, and I instantly fell in love with it. But I simultaneously on that trip broke my back in two places, rock climbing. So I went back to Manhattan and was unable to do the job that I had been doing, which was a pharmaceutical representative, which was quite exhausting, walking the streets of Manhattan with drug samples. I had a three-story walk-up building I was living in. So my life as I knew it had to completely change. So I decided to recuperate on the island of Aruba. And then I came up with the idea of perhaps starting a tour company. So I came up with a business plan while I was pretty much bedridden for a year. And through the research of the other tours that were offered on the island of that time, I realized, wow, none of them are really tapping into the history of Aruba. They're kind of telling a history that's more for entertainment purposes, maybe working more for tips, which I completely understand. However, I thought, wow, it would be something unique for our tour company to actually tell the historical evidence and the ancient stories of this island. And so I began this quest of trying to uncover as much information as I could about the ancient history of Aruba, going back as far as I possibly could. And I didn't realize at the time how difficult that was going to be, and still continues to be, by the way, to this day. I have uncovered finally at this point, maybe 75 to 100 studies and archaeological reports about the giants on the island. But it took me years to accumulate all that, and also my own finances to get a hold of these studies, which, believe it or not, although they are financed by us in a lot of ways, particularly through grants, et cetera, and taxpayer money, it's hard to get access to these reports. A lot of them are housed in medical libraries, etc. And it was through my research of the old maps, the early explorers, what they detailed in their notes, and then the archaeological reports, that I was able to determine that the islands were actually originally called the Islands of the Giants. And this was named after the people who actually lived on the island approximately 7,000 years ago, and even into the late 1400s, early to mid 1500s AD.
Well, that's not very interesting now, is it? Wow, holy cow. Please note the sarcasm when I say that. For you, getting to know this, growing up in Manhattan, you had obviously a career there that you had to give up, and just decided to find something that suited your mind, body, and soul, and that's what led you to Aruba. Did you ever see yourself going from the pharmaceutical industry to living in the Caribbean and enjoying the sunshine and the beaches every day, or was that just a pipe dream that you made happen?
Trudging around Manhattan in heels and snow and sleet, and with all these people. Yeah, I mean, you dream about it. It's you try to transport yourself mentally to another place that's warm and inviting every day. when you're there. But no, I just figured, oh, I'll keep doing the working for the pharmaceutical company, maybe take a different type of sales gig at some point, that it wasn't so stressful, although I think most sales jobs are. And I never envisioned leaving New York at all. So it was really quite the turn of events when that opportunity arose. And I'm so thankful that I did so, because I just, yeah, I stumbled upon, I think, one of the greatest mysteries that have yet to be uncovered to this day. I don't think many people even know that there were giants in the Caribbean, let alone in Aruba and Bonaire and Curaçao, which are the three sister islands, the ABC Islands, they call them, all under the Kingdom of the Netherlands, actually. So, yeah, no, it was always a dream, to have it come to fruition is really even a bigger dream. And I'm filled with gratitude every day.
Did you always have a fascination with history, or did this kind of land in your lap because you wanted to be more accurate with the history of your tours?
Yes, well, I always love to travel, and I love to do things, to take trips to places probably most people wouldn't think would be a nice relaxing vacation. So for example, I spent like 3 weeks in India, going to as many of the ancient Hindu temples, such as in Khajuraho, for example, and Madurai in southern India. So I would go out west and go on tours where just we were focusing on petroglyphs and pictographs. And so I always had an affinity towards history, and even the mysteries, history's mysteries, for example, such as Bigfoot, for example, was always interesting to me. So I was always interested in both the historic and these unsolved mysteries of the earth as well. So but when I came to Aruba and was bedridden, really my goal was just to figure out where in the marketplace of tourism was there a hole, and how could I fit that hole. And in this case, it was through doing private tours. And so therefore, I thought, okay, so we'll be a private tour company, but there has to be something more, because obviously we're going to be a little bit more expensive because it's a private tour. And that's when I thought, well, why don't we just make them historically accurate, since I would go undercover to all these tours that other tour guides were doing, and I was seeing what they were talking about. And so I realized, no, they're all kind of following the same script, and it's very entertaining and lively. But for people who really are serious about history, I want to provide that for them. I just had no idea how difficult finding that history out would be.
How has your life changed as you've gone down this path of learning?
Yes, it's a great question. It's funny because I always say I didn't find the giants found me. And it's a total obsession. You never stop thinking about it. I drive around this island daily, and there are a lot of balance stones, megalithic sites that I've discovered. I've actually mapped them. And every day I'm seeing something different. I have a whole list. I have to explore this. I have to look at this. I have to ask so and so about this. Now I just found out, I've been interviewing a series of fishermen on the island who have said they've encountered mermaids, and I found a mermaid petroglyph on the island. I found a Bigfoot petroglyph on the island, and I found people who are willing to tell me about instances where they've encountered these Bigfoot inside of caves. So it keeps going on and on. So just when you think, okay, no, I've gotten everything, now I know everything, and there can't be any more to research about the giants or about Aruba, which is such a tiny island, then something will come up and someone will mention something to me or send me something via social media, and then it just keeps going. So you're never finished with the mysteries on this island. So just as you think you're finishing up one, then another pops up. And quite frankly, I believe they are all intertwined.
How big is Aruba for people who've never been there?
Yes, so it's only a little bit bigger than the island of Manhattan. So it's about 8 miles wide and 16 miles long. You can do the whole island by driving in an hour, give or take. But because there aren't many roads, most of the roads are dirt roads, and we have a bunch of hills and mountains. Right outside my window is an extinct volcano, for example. So even though it's a small island, there is a lot. It's a little bit difficult to get around. As a matter of fact, tomorrow I have to get I think since I've been here, my eighth new tire because the roads are so bad, and but which adds to the fun of it all, I suppose. But yeah, so it's a small island, but there are so many places that are just protected. They're unspoiled, and they're covered with vegetation. So the dry season will be coming up soon, which is also called the hot season. And there, a lot of the vegetation dies, and then I'm going to be stumbling upon new sites for sure. So even though it's small, there's still so much to be unearthed and uncovered and to be researched.
As you have grown to learn to love your home down there in Aruba and the other island hopping that goes around, you mentioned that there are three islands there that really need to be focused on. Curacao being one, and the other one being I apologize, starts with a B, Bonaire.
Yes.
Yeah. So
And Curacao.
for those ones, are the legends pretty much the same as what you were investigating on Aruba?
Yeah, so as far as I know, I think I'm the only person on Earth who is researching the giants of Aruba, Bonaire, and Curacao. So the three islands were once one island, and they were separated by a series of three mega tsunamis from 3500 BC, 500 BC, 2500 BC. There were these mega tsunamis. The geologists determined that the three islands were never part of the South American mainland. So I'm only 16 miles off the coast of northern Venezuela. As a matter of fact, we can see Venezuela from Aruba. So those islands, the geologists determined, were never attached to the mainland, but were created through a series of uplift through volcanic and earthquake activity. And then through these mega tsunamis, this one giant island was then separated. So there is a connection between all three islands. There are the same giant remains found on all three islands. As a matter of fact, one is on display on the island of Bonaire of a giant skeleton. The megaliths and the mostly the megaliths are in Aruba, and the most of the petroglyphs and pictographs are in Aruba and Bonaire, and yes, in Bonaire. And also in Curacao, it's a lot more skeletal remains as well as artifacts such as pottery, for example. So they all share the same ancient people. They all the creation myth of the giants begins in Bonaire. And I think one of the most important places for the giants was in Aruba. I think at the point when the giants were here, the islands probably were able to be crossed very easily. They might have had a lower sea level. So, and since they were once attached, it might have been much easier. Now, of course, it's not. And also, there's a series of underground cave systems. Actually, Bonaire has some of the most caves in the entire Caribbean, about 500. And some of these caves are purported to join each other. So, for example, there's a cave here in Aruba that's been blocked off for mysterious reasons. And it turns out that that cave is proposed to go all the way to Venezuela. So there's a lot of interesting components that connect the islands, and literally and figuratively. And all three show the remains of the giants, and skeletal remains have been found of the giants on all three islands.
Wow. So let's go back in time a little bit. When did you first learn about these giants, and what piqued your curiosity about them?
Well, I came across a book by Amerigo Vespucci. Actually, it was a book filled with his letters that he was writing as he was exploring the new world, quote unquote. And he was the one who came up with the term, the Islands of the Giants. And it was due to his time here in Aruba. So, to make a long story short, Christopher Columbus had already been over to this side of the world and made note of Aruba because of the mainland native population in northern Venezuela had communicated to him about the islands and about the potential of there being gold there, which of course there is gold here, and also about the giants. So he made this notation, went back to Europe, and then Vespucci, through a series of, I think, a little bit underhanded dealings, got the sole contract for the trip back to this side of the earth to go to explore further, and Aruba was on his list. So Vespucci then came back and did travel to Aruba, and he gives coordinates actually when he writes these letters. He's very detail oriented, and he writes these letters. And so I worked with a cartographer who is familiar with ancient maps, and we figured out that in the past, all the historians would say, oh no, Vespucci first went to Curaçao, but it's not true. He first went here to Aruba, and he details his encounter with the giants. He meets with them. He almost gets killed by them. He tries to steal two of the teenage girls who are there. And they are immediately, the explorers, just floored at the size of these women who they first come across the women. And they say, even if they were kneeling and we would standing, the giants would still be taller than us. So they were actually, quite interested in them, and obviously wanted to steal two of them to bring back as trophies, because they couldn't even believe the size of them. And it was when 36 men came back into the village and made threatening gestures with weapons, that Vespucci goes into great detail, explaining within the letter that he's never seen any weapons like these before. He couldn't even figure out how he could even lift one of the weapons. That's how big they were. And these men scared the explorers off so that they quickly went back to their ship. And as they were going back to their ship, the giants, because they were so tall, were actually following them in the water, in the ocean, and shooting arrows at them. And Vespucci commanded some of the people on the ship to start to signal with cannon fire to try to push the giants back to shore. And that was the only thing that would deter the giants and made them go back to shore. And so it was interesting because Vespucci said, he felt that day he was going to die. He was so afraid of the giants, which is interesting because the day before, he had been witnessing a human being being eaten on a small island off the coast of Colombia. So he was more afraid of the giants than being around a tribe of people who were eating a human. So, and then he concludes by saying, I name these islands the Islands of the Giants due to the large stature of the people who live there. And so once I read that, then I just went off and that's when I just knew, there had to have been giants here. And then I realized how much documentation there was from actual firsthand accounts, from researchers holding these skulls, the measurements of the skulls, the photos of the skulls, particularly their hands. Also, these skeletons are so old. A lot of them just deteriorated, but a lot of them, they still were able to get their skulls. And so that is which are very bizarre looking, completely almost. Yeah, they don't look like modern humans at all. So, and then once I realized, oh, wow, there is scientific proof to back up this claim, then it just, then I just couldn't believe it. I was just obsessed. To this day, I still am.
We got 30 seconds to go here. I mean, the passion that you have, it's definitely in your voice. It's definitely something that you have found, a journey that you want to take to the absolute end. 20-second answer. How fun is it?
Oh my gosh, it's so much fun. It's, I just am so happy that the Giants found me because it adds so much to my experience in Aruba and actually is what brought me back here when I moved and then came back in 2022 and the Giants brought me back here.
All right. We're going to continue on with the giant talk. We're going to go back in time. Researcher, tour guide, Heather Arnold is here from the lovely island of Aruba and the giants that walked among the islands at one point long ago. It's going to be a great night of radio. Stay tuned. This is Spaced Out Radio. All right, we are clear. That was a fun first half hour.
I can't believe how fast that went. Oh my gosh. That is quick.
I told you.
Unbelievable. Yeah, you ask good questions
Forewarned
too.
you.
I'm sorry?
I forewarned you.
Yeah, no, you were right. It's just, yeah. You're a professional, so.
I am a professional.
Yes.
That is true.
Yes. It's nice.
The island is only 8 miles wide or long.
Yeah, wide. Yes. Yeah. You can see, from one side to the other very easily. From north to south, it's longer. But like I said, because of the road situation, we don't have any traffic lights here. I think we only have like 3 or 4 stop signs. It's a rough ride. And also you have to go around a huge volcano that's literally in the center of the island. And there are a lot of hills, so you have to go around and it's a lot of farms. So there's no there is a highway, but it doesn't take you from north to south. You still have to get off and go around. So it takes you if you were driving from the north of the island to the south, it could take you over an hour.
Wow.
Yeah, it's crazy.
You can't even get to Vancouver that quick.
Yes, right. Yeah, no, it's for a small island, it's just so full of so many interesting things. I mean, I still have a list. I've been here now, back here for almost 3 years, and I still haven't even touched upon all the things on my list of places I have to still research. It's incredible.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah, it's definitely
is it
awesome.
Expensive there?
I'm sorry?
Is it expensive there?
Yes. That's the bummer. It's very expensive. Every single thing is imported. Nothing is made in Aruba. So that's challenging. You really have to budget your money wisely because everything is, even electricity is even very, very expensive. We have a desalination.
What would a jug of milk cost there?
It's funny. So if you buy milk from the States, it's going to be very expensive. I buy the milk in the box from Holland because it's cheaper. And we're not big milk drinkers, so it's okay. I usually just use it for cooking. But I'm not sure milk. Our eggs are relatively inexpensive because we have local eggs. I go to a local farm. But if you buy the eggs from the States now are $9 for a dozen. So a little over $9 for a dozen eggs if you get the American eggs in the grocery store. I go right to a farm and I get them from a chicken farmer. So it costs me $3.
That's not bad.
Yeah, and they're delicious and they're organic, so it's much better.
What's electricity there? What's your electricity bill per month?
Yeah. That's a huge problem because your air conditioning is going 24/7. So that's always an issue. So my bill, it's still cheaper than it was in New York. It's about a little over $200 US a month. But it's still that is my biggest bill actually, is my electricity. And depending on what you're doing, then it will go up. It never goes down, it only goes up.
Is it a very modern island? I said, I don't know much about it.
Yeah, it's modernized so much because so many Americans now travel here and Canadians actually. So they had to really, rise to the occasion. And so they have completely modernized. We have fiber optics for our Wi-Fi. American products, Canadian products. We have a lot of European products here,
Cool.
grocery stores that are modern. So thankfully, they have modernized since when I had my daughter here in 2006, 2005, 6, that time when I first moved here. It was not modern at all. Very primitive. Very different. Not primitive, but compared to now, people would say it was primitive.
All right, we got about 35 seconds. Big thank you to Lenda for our lone super chat of the night. We really appreciate the love and support. And we're going to come back here pretty quickly. Don't forget, you can shop at our Spaced Out Radio store. We do not have ugly swag, people. No ugly swag, so make sure you check it on out. We're going to be adding some more stuff there soon. So it's going to be really cool. We're going to take the T-shirts and everything in a way different direction. Welcome to the show, Major Lee. Thank you for the super chat all the way from jolly old England. Appreciate you, my friend. And here we go. Here we go with the second half hour of Spaced Out Radio tonight. Giants of Aruba. That is the topic du jour. Heather Arnold is our guest. We'll get to her momentarily. I want to say hello to all of you tuning us in wherever you are on this beautiful planet we call Earth. Reminder to all of you that if you missed portions of this show or others, our archives are always free. Why? Because I like them being free for you to listen to. You pay for too much. You're allowed some free stuff in this world, and that is our archives on YouTube or any major podcast network. Our website, spacedoutradio.com. We have a plethora of features for you. Rock out to Bumblefoot, read the news wire, check out our swag as well. Follow us on X at Spaced Out Radio, Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show, and on Patreon in the Space Travelers Club. Here's Heather Arnold. She lives on the beautiful island of Aruba. Why is she on a weird show like this? Well, she's talking about the giants that used to walk there. Heather, thank you for coming on in.
Oh, thank you so much again, Dave. I appreciate it.
Not a problem. Not a problem at all. And I'm so excited to have you here. How long ago did the giants allegedly live on the islands?
So the original dating that the archaeologists gave to the giants, which they termed the archaics, was 5,000 years ago. But now, due to better dating techniques, obviously science is progressing so fast, thankfully, the date has now been pushed back more to about 7,000 years ago. So the giants were the dominant race of people living on the three islands. They were the ones in control. There were many of them. It's believed they were matriarchal, as a matter of fact. And it wasn't until about 1000 AD that mainland populations of Arawak-speaking tribes, one tribe in particular called the Cacateo, came over to Aruba. And so we have evidence, and the archaeological record shows that at some point the Cacateo, who were average statured people, and the giants were living together. But the giants were the elite ruling class. They were the ones in control of the entire island. So the Cacateo, I don't know how much they would interact with the giants. You do find some burials where they are mixed together, but the giants are always the ones given the elite burials, the most grave gifts, the most complex burials, the most prominent burial within the entire burial shape, which they buried people in the shape of they placed the burials in the shape of isosceles triangles. They were obsessed with isosceles triangles, which is another strange component. So it was about 7,000 years ago. And Personally, I think it's even further back, just because of when you read about the potential or the attempted excavations of these skeletal remains by the researchers. They all speak about these bones just completely disintegrating. They could not even get the skeletons out of the earth, and most of the time they could only get the skull. So for me, that just demonstrates tremendous antiquity. So I think now, today, it is 7,000 years ago, and who knows, in a couple of years, when the techniques get even more accurate, how far back we go from there.
How big were they?
So there is one giant skeleton, and it is on display in Bonaire. And I tell people this, and people can't believe it. I've been talking about it for years. I just saw it a year ago again. I always go in and check on it. It is in a government-run museum. This giant was found pretty recently, in the 1980s, when they were building a bus stop. And it was found by accident. It is the most complete giant skeleton ever to be unearthed, to this day. And I spoke to the head of the museum, who confirmed to me, and I have all his information, and he goes on record as saying it was definitely a giant. And an entire research paper had been done on this giant, and it's called the Bonaire skeleton. And it was determined that this giant was over 8 feet tall. So people say, well, that's not really a giant. There are NBA players, but that is a mathematical equation that the researchers, the investigators, come up with. They don't base it actually on the size of the bone, although that plays into it, simply because a lot of the bones, especially the ages of the bones that we're talking about, the bones shrink. So in the investigation, in the actual archaeological report called the Bonaire skeleton, the researchers do go on to explain that the giant was probably much, much larger in life. Not only that, they mention how robust the bones were. So these were wider people. They weren't skinny, slender giants. These were not only tall people, but they were wide, they were big, and they also had an elongated skull. So this giant in Bonaire, and that's smushed into a box so disrespectfully, put into a fetal position, which is even more outrageous. Kind of in the corner of a museum, of a room that you will miss unless you're specifically looking for the Bonaire skeleton. So it's so strange the way these things work out. And anyway, so if you are to go there and see, that's how this giant would be. But it does mention that it was from the Islands of the Giants, that this is considered a giant. And then when I spoke to the government, the curator of the museum, the museum is run by the government of Bonaire, and he told me that, yes, it was a giant. So I actually went there with the intention of collecting some bone samples, because I was able to find a lab to do testing on the samples of the bones. And so when I went to Bonaire, my purpose was not just to check up on the giant, but was to actually speak to the head of the museum and see if I could leave with a bone sample to do independent study through, obviously certified laboratories, etc., on the bone, to determine if there was any DNA evidence, if we could age the skeleton. And he told me no. And I said, why? And he said, because there have been people coming here within the past couple of weeks to take bones from the skeleton. And I thought that was so odd, because this skeleton was found, actually, it was in about 1979. Research wasn't done on the skeleton till 1980. The report on the skeleton was even done after that. So this was a skeleton that had been sitting there for quite some time. And now all of a sudden there was some tremendous interest in this skeleton. And so he mentioned, curiously, that one of the people who took the bone sample was an archaeologist he's actually an American, but he's based down in St. Martin. And he took a sample. And those results, of course, we don't have yet. I don't know. It's been a year. So we should have something. And the other was these two gentlemen from Italy that he presumed could have been from the Vatican, which was so strange. And he said that they took a bone sample. So he said, I don't want any more bones taken from the skeleton. So and I explained to him, that's great. I love that there's interest in people wanting to test this skeleton, except how do we know that we're going to get the results? How do we know that we're going to, get the truth? If I do it independently, we could all share our conclusions, or I'll just share my conclusions, since I don't know if the others will ever share their conclusions. And sadly, he did not allow me to take any bones. So, and to this day, we have no record of any of the reports or analysis that has come back from the DNA testing that's been done. So, because that would really be interesting as well, since the archaeologist here in Aruba stated that he believed these giants had light skin and light hair and light eyes. So they didn't appear to have any Native American DNA at all, but were from some other race of people that were to this day unidentified.
Going back in time, what do we know about them? We know their size. We know, like you just said, they seem to be fair skinned. Were they a violent race? Were they a race of peaceful giants? Were there many of them, or were there a few in numbers? What do we know?
So, yeah, great question. So, what we know is that I don't know how many of them there were. For example, also right across from where I am is a cave system. And in this cave system, which is very hard to get to, it's very dangerous. Inside is what I believe is a birthing chamber. There is a petroglyph on the wall of a woman, and she also has an elongated skull. She also has a shroud on, which is quite interesting. And in her womb is a little baby, and then there's a little cup mark, indentation in the wall where her belly button would be connecting to the baby. And then next to her are these slashes, slashes that are similar to what you would find, for example, if you went to Sedona, there is a Native American birthing chamber with the same type of dots or slashes to indicate births. And in that chamber, we don't have a lot of slashes. I don't believe there were a ton of births. And if there clearly there were births, they would have been quite difficult because the skulls were elongated. So I presume there was probably a lot of tribulation and difficulty in birthing these elongated skull giant babies. So we do know that the largest cemetery, which is here in Aruba, called Malmuk Cemetery, the archaeologists stopped digging at 75 burials. So they found up to 75 burials, but just stopped because the bodies were disintegrating. It was too much for them. I think their funding kind of ran out as well. And so that area is actually a protected site. Interestingly, there are a lot of very expensive homes around this burial ground, and none of them know they're on an Indian burial ground or a giant burial ground, shall we say. They don't know it all. So I'm always curious to go over and interview them and see if they have had any creepy experiences over there. So, but what we do know is that the ones that were here were the dominant ones. They were in charge. The burial site, for example, where there were at least 75 burials, we noticed that the burials were done in the shape of isosceles triangles. We find their tools. They were tool makers, very expert tool makers. Their tools all have carved into them isosceles triangles. And so that, which is very odd. Their pottery is so complex and so advanced that you can tell right away. If we're hiking and I see pottery, I could tell right away if it's the giants pottery or later period indigenous people who came from South America or other places, because the quality is just completely different. The giants were They had these elongated skulls. Their anatomy was different due to the weight of their skulls. So the giants' elongated skulls did not go up. For example, like the Paracas mummies in Peru, or the cone heads of, the back in the day on SNL. The giants' heads here in Aruba went up and back. So the main weight of the brain case was towards the back of the skull. So the way that the neck connects to the skull had to be in a different position to accommodate the weight of the skull. The brain in the skull. And so we also know that this was natural. This was genetic. And we know this because the archaeologists were hell-bent in trying to figure out if this was headboarding. They were looking everywhere. They wanted to just really say, no, this is headboarding, and that's it. But no, they couldn't say it because they found no evidence of headboarding. Furthermore, if you have an infant child and you want that child to have an elongated skull and you put the boards on the child's skull, it takes 6 months for the child's skull to become elongated if you're doing it artificially. And in the case of the giants, they found a newborn baby, the archaeologists, who had an elongated skull. So that was the definitive proof that they knew that the giants actually had a naturally occurring elongated skull. They had big teeth, big hair. Everything was very large about them. If you see their pictures of them, it's just it's astounding that they're even human. They did have evidence of eating like some crops, some vegetation. They were obsessed with limestone. They did a lot of their rituals on limestone. They also created megalithic structures such as balanced stones, standing stones. These stones have alignments with celestial events that I've been charting for 17 years, equinoxes, solstices, also supermoons, etc. So they were Orion, Cygnus, also constellations are represented. They were master artists. They made petroglyphs. They were prolific petroglyph and pictograph makers. There is one two cave systems here in Aruba that have at least 500 drawings. So they were very, I think they were very spiritual people. For example, Vespucci was told by the mainland culture of the people of Venezuela, northern Venezuela, when he was asking about the island before he came here, about the people, were they violent? And he said, and they said to him, they are only violent if they're provoked. If they're not provoked, then they're peaceful. They just want to be left alone. And a couple of other interesting things they said was that that they were more intelligent, more advanced than they were themselves, and that they worshiped the sun. And so that's really the only indication of what maybe their spiritual beliefs were, is this brief notation of a mention of them being worshippers of the sun, which is quite interesting. And there are a lot of drawings and carvings of sun, what we would presume could be the sun as well. But that was an interesting component as well. They weren't cannibals. There's no evidence of human sacrifice and cannibalistic activity. So we're to presume that potentially they were just a peaceful people ruling the island. It is interesting to note that when you find giants, you often find little people. And Aruba is no exception. So in the cemetery here, the largest one where they stopped uncovering at 75 graves, they found a little person. And the little person was given an elite burial, so which is very interesting. And they determined, the archaeologists, that the bones of this little person, that nothing really looked off. They seemed completely proportionate, except for the fact that they were small. And they believed that this person died of old age and was perhaps carried throughout their lives. And now we're finding evidence, particularly going back to the Neanderthals, that when people had something that we would consider abnormal, such as being a dwarf, or another type of anomaly. For example, another skeletal remain had a hump back. These people were kind of glorified and protected and treated as something special and important to the people, and not kind of disregarded or treated as other, but actually exalted and treated almost as superior in a way. And another interesting thing about the burials of the giants all have their skull, the elongated part of their skull, covered in red ochre. So what the archaeologists propose is that the skeletal remains were dug up after a while, after they had become skeletal, and then in another ceremony, their heads were painted. Just the elongated part was painted in red. However, the interesting part about their cemetery is that most of the year it's covered in water. So these burials could only take place in a 4-week period during our dry season, which is what we also call the hot season. And that's the only time that lake becomes a dry lake bed. And that's the only time that you could ever do burials, because other than that, it's completely covered in brackish water. And so it's my proposal, and I will be presenting this to the archaeologists here, as I do all my findings. They are aware of all my findings. That I believe that this was a culture of death, that there was a tremendous ritual that was attached to death, and that as people died throughout the year, they might have left the bodies out to be, eaten by the animals here, and in a very, what I find to be quite interesting and humane way, in a sense, giving back to the earth. And once the skeletons, the bodies became skeletons, then they painted the skulls. Excuse me, and then they buried the skulls in a huge ritual of death. And this is my proposal, because I can't imagine any other time that you would be able to put burials into that dry lake bed. And so that's another very interesting component, because their burials were so intricate, their cemeteries were so distinct, that they really focused on death a lot, as much as life, probably equally, if not more so.
So that tells me it was a very spiritual time for them back there, probably to the gods of the stars, the gods of sun, the gods of the moon, gods of water, everything along those lines. Were there ever any weaponry found, swords, bow and arrows, maybe sunken ships, cannonballs, anything like that? Or were they just primitive because they were kind of out on their own, and not many people back then were traveling in those areas as explorers?
We do find I found an area where they were making their tools. So they also had, you could find like big spheres that they were making, I think, for slingshots. Because we do have small game here, and I don't know, 7,000 years ago, we probably had even different game here. I know some of the drawings and some of the caves are of animals that we do not have here. So I think that they were using them primarily to hunt, and they were prolific fishermen. They were fishing all the time. There's a matter of fact where they were, we also have a lot of shell middens on the island that include burials within them. And the archaeologists figured out that one of the places where they were making a lot of their tools and eating and collecting their shellfish was from an area of the ocean on this island that actually creates new species of shells every year. So every year, a new species of shell. And last year, I believe it was 9 new species of shells were coming through this one small area, which is actually adjacent to their burial site. So they were busy making tools with that, making these intricate burial mounds. But other than that, we don't find swords or anything like this. Their tools are quite intricate. They're very large. As a matter of fact, I had a friend who found one a couple of years ago, and exactly, you could almost see that's where the giant put it down, and he just was hiking and he looked down and he saw it, and he brought it to the archaeology museum, and sadly they just put it in a box and put it in the basement, and it's not on display. But their tools were very large. I mean, every tool that you find from the giants is large, and they were master tool makers. And you can see also where they discarded tools that didn't fit in, or weren't good, or didn't come out the way they wanted. But they also, yeah, they were making big tools. But other than that, we don't see any weaponry. I haven't heard of any cannonballs. We do have sunken ships all around the island, but not going back that far, sadly.
I love it. We got about 25 seconds before we have to go to break here at the top of the hour. Heather Arnold is our guest, talking about the giants of Aruba. And I'm just finding this so fascinating. I mean, you hear of giants being scary. You hear of them being violent and used as giants weapons of war. I mean, that goes right back to biblical times. But here they seem to be just enjoying life, being who they were. And we're going to find out more about the giants. What killed them? Why aren't they around anymore? We need to know. I mean, can you imagine how many of these guys would get NBA contracts if they were still alive today? We'll be right back with our Space Down Radio. This is Space Down Radio with host Dave Scott. All right, we are clear. So we're going to take a quick break for about 5.5 minutes. I'm just going to disappear here for a minute. I'm going to put you back in the green room, and we'll be right back, okay?
Okay, sure. No problem. I'll be here.
All right, we'll be right back, everybody. All right. I am back. Roger, how you doing? Let's bring Heather back in. You having fun, Heather?
Yeah, I'm enjoying it. Thank you so much.
Dean Moretti, how you doing? All right. Lots of questions coming from the audience. We'll get to them here in hour 2.
Okay.
Cat's Tongue, how are you? All right, we're caught up. We're caught up. Great topic tonight. Great topic. Ross Smith, how you doing? Remember, if you have questions, please put them in capital letters. Skip to Malou, how are you? Good to see you. Thank you tonight to CS, Lee, and Lenda for the super chats. Greatly appreciate the love, everybody. Thank you very, very much. And we're coming back here in 5 seconds. Number 2 of Spaced Out Radio is now underway. My name is Dave Scott. We're talking Giants of Aruba with Heather Arnold, and so far it's a great show. You might have to catch up on it. It's free. Hey, I want to say hello to everyone listening in on our terrestrial affiliates around North America, digitally on every major podcast network. Our website, spacedoutradio.com, we have a plethora of features for you. Rock out to Bumblefoot, read the news wire, check out our swag as well. Follow us on X at Spaced Out Radio, Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show, and on Patreon in the Space Travelers Club. The Desert Clam has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club. Faniant. Faniant is your password. Use it wisely, Space Travelers, as the Clam sets the password each and every night right here on Spaced Out Radio. All right, let's bring in Heather Arnold once again. Hanging on out, the Giants of Aruba is the topic. We're giants walking around this golden island of beautiful beaches, blue water, the bright blue that we could only dream of if you've never been to the Caribbean, like I never have. Oh, sharks everywhere. Heather, welcome back.
Thank you so much.
I'd like to ask you about the archaeologists who are looking into this. Usually scientists like archaeologists and historians, they usually get a little cranky when some person comes walking around and investigating them who doesn't have the education or doesn't have the credentials in their mind. How have you been treated in finding this information on a tourism venue rather than on a scientific level?
On a tourism level, no, I give my tour company is called Ancient Aruba Tours, and they're all private tours, 4-hour tours, and after you go on my tour, you'll see things once you get back on the plane that no one else on that entire plane has seen the entire time they were in Aruba. So the sites that I show are, undeniably important. And once you see them, you can't unsee them. So, for example, the megaliths, how they balance these stones of those alignments. Massive, massive stones. Their burial. I take you to the cemetery. I show you some of their tools, some of their drawings. So, for tourism wise, it's been wonderful. It's always open-minded people who generally have already are familiar with my work, and so they're excited to see a different Aruba than all of the other tour companies, because the tour companies would never go or wouldn't even know that these sites exist. That's the other interesting part, that they're just driving by these massive shell middens where there are still burials inside the shell middens. And and to think that no one even knows that it's there, and to me it's some of the most interesting parts of the island. So in terms of my tours, they are very well received, and I'm so excited to always share the information and research to someone face to face so they could actually see it. I speak about it all the time, but then to actually show people what I'm speaking about, it's exciting for me and for them.
I love it because usually, I mean, you smiled when I asked that question, and you so obviously you knew what I was talking about. There could be some people saying "get off my lawn" kind of thing,
Yes.
in regards
Yes.
to that. Now, the one thing that I learned in researching this is that when the island was discovered by European explorers, I believe around 1499, they
Yes.
were seeing the giants walking around, and they're the ones who actually, named it the Island of the Giants. I mean, that isn't that long ago, historically speaking. That's only 700 years ago, 800, So, I mean, the fact that they were around very recently is quite amazing. How do and I apologize. I know I asked you this. I can't remember the answer. I do apologize. Bad host. But how did they just vanish? How did they disappear?
Well, that's a great question, actually, because uh, I don't believe any of these people just disappear. I think they just make themselves out of existence, and that is what the scientific evidence actually shows in the case of the giants here. So, in 2002, there was a bunch of geneticists who came here to Aruba specifically to research the genetic makeup of the people who have lived in Aruba the longest and have never left the island. There were a lot of parameters that the people who wanted to participate in this study had to meet. And one of them was going back as far as their great grandmother, even if they could remember their great great grandmother. All of them were born here in Aruba, and none of them had left the island. So they came up with this large population of people who were who for generations had been on the island and had not left. And their DNA analysis showed that a portion of their DNA consisted of DNA that does not exist today and is not found in any other people, and specifically happens to occur in the people of Aruba, these specific people. And it was the conclusion of the investigators that this DNA had to be ancient DNA, an archaic DNA, because it wasn't even connected to the mainland, mainland meaning mainland South America populations of people at that time. So it had to be attributed to the giants. They were not able to connect it to any modern DNA found today. So it is my belief, and given the fact that I believe in what is the birthing chamber, there were very few births. There must have come a point where the giants just couldn't just mate with each other, which I think that they were doing mostly to just maintain their elite status and their race. They finally had to mate outside of their closed population. And that eventually led to the giants basically just being absorbed into the average stature populations. And it appears that the DNA evidence does conclude that. So I don't think, some people think that they went and on a boat and they went somewhere else. And that actually, there is evidence for that as well. So there were two breakaway civilizations that archaeologists have discovered. One is in Cuba, in a cave system in Cuba, and the other is in the middle of the rainforest, kind of on the border of Colombia and Venezuela. And researchers were able to conclude that these were the same people as found here in Aruba, Bonaire, and Curaçao. And they were not only able to determine that through the the sheer anatomy of the skeletal remains, but also the burial practices, particularly going back to these isosceles triangles. So they too were burying their people in isosceles triangles. And it's interesting to note in some of the cases, the giants be in the supine position in the burial, which means that they are facing upwards with their bodies straight, which is very rare for ancient burials. And they were at the angles of the triangle. And then the average statured people were filling in the lines of the triangle. And this is something that researchers saw in Cuba and in Colombia. So I believe the giants, some of them left and started these breakaway civilizations, but none of those civilizations were as large in population as the ones found here on the islands. And I think then the others just bred themselves out of existence, essentially, or were absorbed into the average stature population. But their DNA is so strong, it still shows up in the people of Aruba today, which I find absolutely fascinating.
I find that quite fascinating as well. The idea that they were spiritual, and we've mentioned this a couple of times already tonight. Have there been any archaeological findings about who they were praying to, who they were worshiping? You know, do we know those god or goddesses, or what have you?
It's hard to tell. I find a lot of cup marks. They were very big into cup marks. And that's why researchers and myself have concluded that there definitely was a matriarchal connection. There were a lot of what I would call pregnant stones that they made, which were monoliths of diorite that they smoothed and carved, and it looks like a woman with a pregnant belly. And then in the center, they would put a cup mark for kind of like her navel. So you see that. So there was definitely this matriarchal presence. I don't know if they were the elites, the females, or if there was just a reverence to the matriarchy. I know in Bonaire, outside a cave system called Onaima, there is a huge, I think it's about 12 feet tall. I thought it was 10, but then when I went back, I measured, it was about 12 feet tall monolith of a female, and she's looking out into the ocean. You could see her face. She too is wearing a veil, and she's carved out of limestone. So, and still to this day, the native population of Bonaire, some of them still leave offerings at her feet, and she is called the Mother Stone, which is interesting. So we have those glimpses of what you could think of as an idol almost, or some sort of reverence to the female. So there's that bit of it, but other than that, it's very hard to determine what exactly they were worshiping, or where exactly their beliefs lied. So I know here in Aruba there are drawings of constellations. There's a drawing of Orion. There's a drawing of Cygnus. So there were definitely a celestial component to what they were doing and their worship. They also, interestingly enough, there is a series of caves where there were only female burials of giants found. And with these females were also found burials of monkeys. So these monkeys were not indigenous to Aruba. However, these monkeys were also given the exact same elite burial as these women were, and actually teenage girls as well. They were all buried together. So it's interesting to note, was the monkey their consort, their cohort, their buddy while they were alive, and that's why they were given the elite burial? Or was the monkey exalted because it was very rare to have a monkey here? Nobody knows, but they were also given an elite burial, and all of their bones were covered in ochre. And they were given little grave gifts, and I've seen photos of the graves that were unearthed by archaeologists, and it's quite fascinating. So other than that, we do have one other indication as to what they were thinking in terms of their creation story, and that is a large monolith of limestone found in Bonaire, with a huge cup mark in the center. And the ancient Bonarians called that the navel of the world. And the belief is that the giants were birthed within the earth, and that their umbilical cord from them goes to this navel that is in this giant monolith of limestone. And so that the giants came from inside the earth and were birthed outside from this navel, came outside of this navel. And that's how the giants were born on these islands. That's the creation story, which is quite fascinating. And that stone is also, it's in Bonaire, and it's clearly marked. It's a little bit difficult to get to, and I don't even think anyone knows it's there at all. And it's not far away from this other giant monolith of the female form that's looking out into the sea. So those are kind of the little glimpses you get of what could have been going on. But then again, I mean, like I said, there are drawings of mermaids. There's a drawing of what could be a Loch Ness monster. There's drawings of Bigfoot creatures in one cave that are huge drawings, giant drawings, very strange creatures. So I'm not really sure, but I think a lot of it is, it's all quite interesting. It's but since I found these drawings of these strange creatures, I have actually interviewed people here who have said that they have seen some of these creatures. They heard stories of some of these creatures. So maybe they were documenting things that they saw. Other than that, we really don't know much more about their faith, their spirituality, or their practices.
Let's get to some audience questions here, because they are building up, and I do want to get the audience involved here. And if you ever want to be in the question realm, you got to be on our YouTube side in order to get your questions in to our guests. Let's start off with Sierra here. Did giants live among humans at the time?
Yes, I'm pretty sure they were living among humans, for sure. Yeah, they were here. They were contemporaneous. 7,000 years ago, there were things going on all over the planet, but that for sure they were interacting with. They were probably interacting with the mainland population, because the mainland population knew to stay away from them. So there must have been some interaction, but for the most part, they stayed on their own and didn't interact.
All right, let's move on to T-Bone. Giants of Aruba and their relationship to the serpent mounds of America. Do you think there's a tie?
Oh, that's so interesting. Yeah, we do have a lot of serpent drawings here in iconography. So there could have been a connection. I think the mound builders were giant people as well. And there could have been an instance where these people from the giants down here in the southern Caribbean could have migrated up and towards North America, which is something that I actually believe might have occurred. So there could have been a connection. The giants here were essentially also mound builders, in that their mounds were made of shells. And these shells, they call them shell middens, and the archaeologists tried to push them all off as just garbage heaps. But after excavating a couple of them and finding burials within the shell middens, it's determined that a few are actual garbage heaps for refuse, and the rest were actual burial mounds. So the burial mound tradition, which is also found in North America, seems to actually have been occurring here as well.
All right, let's continue on here. Let's go to Lee in the UK, who is asking, good morning, Heather, on his time. In many archives, we see giants on the front line of warfare. Is there any evidence of their role in warfare?
So the only evidence we have is the story that Vespucci tells. And his story is of almost being killed by the giants. That they wanted the explorers to leave, and they made threatening advances. They had tremendous tools. Vespucci in his writings describes their weapons. Actually, I said tools, but I meant weapons. He describes them very intricately, and he speaks about, he didn't even know what some of the tools would be used. I mean, the weapons would be used for. And again, he postulated that he probably couldn't even lift the weapons. They were so big. So they clearly knew that there were people trying to come and on their islands, and they were probably embattled many times. However, the only instance of there being some sort of warlike activity was when Vespucci and his men came to Aruba and the giants kicked them out.
All right, let's continue. Let's go to Paramarv. Have you followed Tales of the Giants in other areas, like in Afghanistan, the U.S. troops supposedly encountered? Any thoughts on those?
Yes, and as a matter of fact, I've asked some former servicemen and women who have been over in Afghanistan, for example, about those stories, and they have all told me that those are true. So I don't know. I don't have much proof of that, but it is interesting to note that a lot of times when there's a war zone situation, there are opportunities to kind of plunder, maybe, or do more research on these artifacts and these sites. For example, think about like Indiana Jones, during the working with the Nazis, trying to get all this information, and he's trying to steal it, take it away from them before they bury it underground in their and keep it from us. So yeah, I think there could be some validity to it. I don't know if we'll ever find out or ever have definitive proof, but it does sound interesting. And I actually, when I do presentations at conferences, I show a map of the world and where all the areas of the world where giants have been reported to have been discovered or rumored to have been living, and it's virtually the whole entire planet. So it could very well be true.
We got 3 minutes to go here before we got to go to break. Let's take another question here. This one, we'll go back to Sierra here. Any idea how the giants died out?
Yeah, so I mean, from what I believe and what the scientific evidence shows is that the giants really bred themselves out. They probably ran out of other giants and then started just mating with average statured people. And so that, I think, is actually, I don't think they even died out. I think maybe they were dying and they weren't enough of them to continue to mate with, and then eventually just started mating with average statured people, and then that was it for the giants. And also, of course, there were the two breakaway civilizations, but and their burial sites were found as well, and they have not been found any further, and their DNA has not been any further found in the local populations there. So I think they bred themselves out of existence, but they still live on in the modern Aruban DNA.
T-Bone is asking, was the American indigenous sun dance inspired by the giants?
Oh, I don't know. That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that. I never even thought about that, but that's something to explore. That's a very good question. I wonder that as well, actually.
Is there any findings about the European explorers coming over and the relationship that was formed with them? Because in certain, obscure islands, including Hawaii, when the explorers went over there, they weren't met with, polite hands, shall we say. Some were killed, some were murdered, others were, left abandoned in the middle of the ocean. I mean, there was a lot of distraught times back then. Is there any word on how it went between the giants and the explorers?
I just have the one letters from Vespucci about how he was trying to steal the two teenage girls and bring them back on the ship so he could bring them back to Europe to show them off that they were actual giants. But other than that, I don't have any instances where, for example, there was some of the explorers were falling in love with the female giants or the male giants, etc., or something, or anything of that nature that I don't have any proof of. But yeah, I do know that when the first people came over to try to bring Catholicism to the island, they kept building a church at the southern point of the island, and continually the giants kept burning it down. And that is something.
Hold
Sure.
that thought. Heather Arnold, we have it till the top of the hour on Spaced Out Radio.
You're listening to Spaced Out Radio with your host, Dave Scott.
My audience is loving you.
Oh, great. Good. I'm glad they're enjoying it.
This is so much fun, and it's such an awesome departure of what we normally talk about on this show. So thank you for being awesome.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you. What do you normally talk about?
We're mainly UFOs, cryptids, ghosts.
Right. Oh, okay.
I like it when Klaus gets us something different every now and again.
Yeah. Oh, good. I'm so glad that they're enjoying it. Then I didn't realize it was mostly that type of angle, but so this is something different.
Absolutely.
Good.
Hard to believe we're 90 minutes in.
Oh, I can't believe it really moves so fast. It's a great show. So you're broadcast all over North America too, then, not just in Canada?
No, all over North, mainly in the United States, to be blunt.
Wow, that's great.
It's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. Gonna have to put you on my map. Behind my flag over here, I have a map of the world.
Oh, good. Yes, please.
Bombshell Bomber, how are you? Rexamillions, nice to see you. Yeah, they are loving it.
Great.
I don't say a boot time. I never say a boot. That's Eastern Canada. Do you still go stateside?
Yes, as a matter of fact, a couple of weeks we'll be in Florida. My daughter and I, we're going to look at colleges. And in the summer, we'll go to New York for a couple of weeks. But mostly, I try to island hop down here and try to see things, in this area of the world. Because, I've been all over Canada. I used to work for Much Music, but based out of New York. And I had to go to Canada all the time, and my best friend and I, we love Canada so much. It's so beautiful. And and I've been all over the US and Mexico, so it's nice to island hop down here and see all the things down here. And so we do go like every year. We see our family, but mostly when I try to travel, I try to travel down in the Caribbean. And I'd love to go back to Peru. That's on my list. So, and Guatemala, those are my two next big trips.
Oh, nice.
I'm excited. Yeah, but if something comes up, it's so easy. There's so many direct flights from Aruba to Miami, Dallas, New York, Boston, Chicago. I mean, so many direct flights, so it makes it quite easy to travel.
I'd love to get down there.
Yeah.
I'd like to check.
Anytime.
I've never seen Caribbean blue water before,
Ugh,
so
it's beautiful.
it is on my bucket list.
Yeah, I hope you do get to come down.
Yeah. I've thought about moving to Central America.
Wow.
Just sell everything
Yeah.
and then move to Central America. But the snakes on the land, the sharks in the water, I don't know how it'd react to that.
Yeah, we have giant Amazonian centipedes. They're the largest in the world. They're like this big, this thick. They have these little, and the only way you can kill them is with a machete. That's how crazy they are, and they're aggressive. So we have those.
Hold on right there because we're coming back. Thank you to Steve, Lenda, Lee ×2, CS, and T-Bone for the great super chats tonight. Appreciate your love and support. And we're going to get going in 5 seconds. Here we go in the second half of Spaced Out Radio. Good to have you with us. My name is Dave Scott, Giants of Aruba, and Heather Arnold. Continue the conversation till the top of the hour. Reminder to all of you that if you've missed portions of this show or others, our archives are always free on YouTube or any major podcast network. Our website, spacedoutradio.com, we have a plethora of features for you. Rock out to Bumblefoot, read the news wire, check out our swag as well. Follow us on X at Spaced Out Radio, Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show, and on Patreon in the Space Travelers Club. Here we go. Heather Arnold, Giants of Aruba. We're continuing with audience questions here. And Heather, thank you so much for being here tonight. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Oh, thank you, Dave. Likewise, I'm really enjoying it.
Let's go to Leacham here, who is asking, how do you think the giant's anatomical structure function? Since paced at a certain point, a giant bipedal humanoid would collapse under its weight. Also, what's the biggest you think they got?
Okay, this is great. So yes, there were clearly anatomical differences between the giants and even us as modern humans. And that's why as soon as the archaeologists see the remains of giants, they know right away it's a giant and it's archaic. So for example, their weight, they were tremendously heavy people. And the reason why we know this is because their bones are so thick. As a matter of fact, one of the archaeologists in one of the reports, he tries to use a regular cadaver saw to saw through the bones of one of the giant skeletal remains, and he can't get the saw through. It keeps breaking. So he had to invent another type of saw to saw through the bones of the giants. So I think they had tremendous bone structure. I mean, much larger than ours, much thicker than ours. They also had, as I had mentioned before, where their head connects to the top of their neck, that was placed further back to accommodate for the large weight of their cranium that held the brain. And so in order for that balance to be offset, the neck connects to the back of the skull, much closer to the back of the skull than in our case. Also, the way the jaw attached to the skull is different. And a lot of the researchers mention how large the jaws were of these giants, because in some cases that's all they found was an upper jaw, a lower jaw. Their teeth were much stronger than ours. As a matter of fact, a lot of the giants were found with full sets of teeth, which is quite interesting. So I think, I think that they were built to be big. Now, there's another archaeological report that was done by an anthropologist who was the former head of the Tropical Museum in Amsterdam. She actually came in the 1980s to analyze skeletal remains that were unearthed by an amateur archaeologist who was determined to find evidence of giants in Aruba. And he found 2 skulls, and he brought them back to Curaçao, and she decided to come from Amsterdam and analyze them. And it was in her analysis that these were the largest bones she had ever seen. And this is in her archaeological report. And one of the skulls, as a matter of fact, had its hand fused to the side of its face. And she determined it was the largest hand she had ever seen, and that these giants could have been upwards of 12 feet tall. And I think that could be something possible as well, because we can't really tell the actual size of these giants just based off of their bones, because all of the bones shrink over time. So it's a mathematical equation that determines the height. And so I think that if you're just basing it off of what you have at that time, of course, it's always going to skew probably lower. But it was her determination that they were the tallest people that she had ever seen in her life. And she thought they were at least 12 feet tall.
That is awesome. Awesome. I would love if they were still walking around today.
I know. I think about that, but then I get nervous. It would probably be very intimidating.
T-Bone is asking, what is your opinion on the Solomon Island living giants?
I love the Solomon Island giants. I'm fascinated by them. I would love to go to the Solomon Islands. I know that island, particularly where they say the giants live, one of those islands within the chain, is like off limits, and no one is even allowed to go there, and the local population is afraid of that island. I know they've seen strange lights coming in and out of the island. There is talk of a human girl, a child, being stolen by the giants, and then when the child got older, that she actually mated with a giant, and then they had this hybrid giant child that allegedly just died a couple of years ago. So I am fascinated by the Solomon Island giants, and I think they are still there because the local population speaks about them, a matter of factly, as if, of course, they're there. It would be silly not to believe that they were there. And the fact that part of that island is kind of like they don't go there. They won't go there. They're so afraid of the giant population that lives there to this day. I think there is validity to that story, and I would love if someone could research that, because it's such a difficult place to get to. It's very hard. I went to Easter Island. That took me 3 days to get there, so I can't imagine Solomon Islands might be even more difficult. But I would love to research that, and that's a great question.
Tim Mothman is asking, could giants be responsible for making some of the megalithic structures found all over the world?
Yes, definitely. And here in Aruba is no exception. We have megaliths here. We have dolmen, we have balanced stones, we have monoliths, we have carved monoliths. And I have actually mapped as many as I can. I'm up to 13 now. And they all follow a distinct pattern that is completely not random. So, for example, all of the petroglyphs and pictographs on this island run parallel lines, northwest to southeast, and the balanced stones and other megalithic structures all follow the same pattern, northwest to southeast, along these same lines of diagonal lines that intersect the island. From north to south. And so this was a very deliberate positioning of these balanced stones. All the balanced stones are pointing to something, whether they're pointing to a burial, they're pointing to drawings, they're pointing to a cave, and they are definitely telling a story. And yes, for sure, they were built by the giants, for sure.
I love it. Let's go to Xanos. Is there any evidence of cannibalism, such as the giants eating the smaller peoples, or do we know what their diet was?
So in some of the teeth, there have been fragments of corn found in the teeth, or a very primitive corn, or something corn-based, maybe not 100% corn. So that has been found in some of the teeth. We know for sure they ate a lot of shellfish, because you could find shells with holes in them where they're very deliberately and perfectly actually made these holes and were able to pull out whatever creature was inside. But interestingly, other than that, we don't have any evidence of what else they ate. I mean, since these were such giant people, you would think their intake of food would be immense. We do know, though, interestingly enough, that that Vespucci mentions that the giants were drinking brackish water. And that's quite interesting because here in Aruba for example, I can only say in Fahrenheit, it was over 90 degrees. And this is not our hot season. In our hot season, it can get to like 120 degrees. And so to drink brackish water actually makes sense because there's some salt in it. And then if you're drinking brackish water, you're going to retain some water. For example, if I go hiking in Chaco Canyon in June, I always put salt in my water to retain water as I'm hiking. So it was actually brilliant that they were drinking the brackish water. So those are the only things we know for sure. But I can imagine they had to have more than just those small things in their diet. And in terms of cannibalism, human sacrifice, there's no evidence of that whatsoever. None of the bone fragments show any evidence of cannibalism.
Leacham is asking, you said that they were elongated heads slope back instead of pointing up. The head shape of the alien xenomorph from the Alien franchises comes to mind. Would this be close to what you described?
Yes, that's exactly what I'm describing. That kind of elongation. Yes, for sure. That's a good reference.
Now, was this a natural process, or were they tying off the heads of the young in order to elongate the skull?
No, this was a natural process, and the archaeologists tried really hard to find evidence that it wasn't natural, but they couldn't find evidence of any headboarding whatsoever. In their own reports, they admit that the elongation is genetic, and the definitive proof was when they found a baby who was less than 6 months old with an elongated skull. Because, as I said earlier, when you are headboarding a baby from birth, the elongation does not begin until at least 6 months old. So this baby was practically a newborn, and it was born with an elongated skull.
Let's go to Ross. Do you think that these could be Nephilim?
Yeah, a lot of people ask that, especially because they had light hair. So when you hear light hair, you could think, was it red hair? And you think of the red-haired giants in Nevada who are very violent and eating people. But there could be a connection to the Nephilim, and this comes up a lot when I do talks and interviews, and there could be. I don't rule it out.
I'm going to throw one in here because you mentioned earlier mermaids. Does the island have a history with mermaids being seen or sirens being seen around it?
Yes, it does. And so funny because I found this petroglyph. I had seen it a long time ago. And then I recently rediscovered it last year, actually. It's on the verge of almost being destroyed where this petroglyph is, which is such a shame. And it is such an odd petroglyph. It's even mentioned in the archaeological report as half human, half fish petroglyph. And so that really sparked my interest, and I began to starting interviewing the fishermen here. And they all tell the tales of seeing a mermaid at sea, particularly when they go fishing at night. And they will hear a woman calling. They will almost get hypnotized. As a matter of fact, sadly, we lost a couple of fishermen a couple of weeks ago. And right away, the fishermen wondered, oh, maybe it was the mermaid. Maybe the siren called them in. Maybe they got hypnotized. And that is something they say with a straight face. They're not just speaking in hyperbole or trying to make a joke. They are really speaking of interactions with some spirit being. They say they can see her. She comes out of the water. She comes on land sometimes. I spoke to the daughter of a fisherman who said she saw it one time. And they draw you in, and they bring you in. And we recently also had a fisherman that was missing, and all the fishermen thought that he had been captured by the siren.
Really?
Yes.
Now, were the sirens what we read about from like the historic level where they would swim up to the boats of the explorers or the traders, and they would woo the men to the board. Then they would jump up, grab them, and then take them into the depths and drown them?
Yes, that's exactly what they say, that they're so beautiful. They come out of the water. Sometimes they're singing this beautiful, haunting melody. And these fishermen tell me that it's not even that they pull you in. You just jump in the water. It's like they don't even have to move. They're just there in the water, and then the fishermen just go and try to capture her or grab her or go with her, and the next thing you know, they sadly pass away. And that's the story they tell. And I mean, these are very seasoned, serious people. They have a super dangerous job, probably one of the most dangerous jobs on this island, and they speak about it like it's truth. I mean, they're not making a joke. They are very serious about it.
My goodness, that's scary. Are there a lot of shipwrecks around there?
Yes, we have a lot of shipwrecks. As a matter of fact, last week, a ship just sank, a tourist boat filled with people. Sadly, a yacht just sank, and thank God everyone survived. And so, yeah, because the waters are so turbulent here, we have a lot of reefs that pop up. We don't have any tides here in Aruba, but because we're so close to the equator. But we do have very turbulent seas, underground mountain ranges, very deep waters. So, yeah, a lot of ships do wreck here, sadly.
Do you ever have, or do people ever catch the sighting of ghost ships?
I haven't heard of ghost ships, but that's an interesting one. I'll have to start asking about that. I know so far I've gotten that people they've actually seen the ghosts of the giants as well. And I interviewed a lot. I have actually had interactions with the ghosts of the giants too, and it's actually terrifying. But yes, people have seen these giants, and as the first thing they say is, they're so tall. They were so tall. That's the first thing they say. They were so tall. And repeatedly in the same location where I also had an interaction with the giants, in terms of this, they were knocking on this I was on a little beach shack by myself and heard all this knocking, and I'm running around, where's the knocking? And finally I realized, oh my gosh, this is like, there's no one here. They have to be the giants, because right where behind me, where I was, and where these ghost sightings are seen of the giants, is a huge, massive burial ground that has been unexcavated of the giants. And instead there has been building put up, there has been windmills put up, so it's completely disrupted the burial ground. I know there was a skeleton found of a giant, and they just told the people to bury it again, to just bury it and forget about it. So, which probably was a nice thing to do, but it would have been nice to do some research first. However, ghost ships I haven't heard about, but the ghosts of the giants themselves I have.
What was it like dealing with the ghosts of the giants? Like, did you see a full body apparition?
I haven't, thank God, but people have, and I interviewed them as well about 2 weeks ago, and I interviewed 3 people, and they all described the same apparition. They saw a man. It was always a man, very, very, very tall, a big person, and they're just kind of staring at them. They don't make any aggressive gestures or anything of that nature. But they will do like this knocking game, which is what they did to me, where they're knocking, like it's always 4 knocks. So I was sitting down on my beach chair, and I heard, I said, oh my gosh. And then I was like, that's weird. And then I heard it over here, and then I heard it over here. And then it was just like, oh my gosh, this is the craziest thing. So that's the only thing that's happened to me. But the other people I interviewed saw full apparitions of the giants. And interestingly, they said it was like they couldn't see their legs. They just were just tall beings. And it appeared like they were floating. So they weren't actually walking. They were floating around, but not making any aggressive stances. But for example, the one young girl I interviewed woke up and the giant was staring at her. So, which must have been horrifying. But she, and even as she told the story, she was getting scared again. But none of them ever tried to touch them or did anything harmful. So that's good. But they have been seen.
All right. We got 5 minutes to go. We still have a bunch of questions, but I want to ask this. What is the attitude of the residents there of paranormal?
This is a society where they fully believe in the paranormal. They are open to it. As a matter of fact, it's interesting because although it's a very Catholic island, it's one of the main religions of the island is Catholicism. They have merged, the local population has merged these ancient beliefs into the Catholicism. So there's a lot of spirituality. There's a lot of belief in ghosts, of bad energy, UFO sightings. We've seen tons of UFOs here, daytime and nighttime, coming out of the sea, for example, also coming out of mountains. So this is a population that has had interactions with the paranormal. For example, on New Year's Eve, all the Arubans, they have sage. They sage their whole house, and then they stay outside for hours to get all the bad energy out of their house. So it definitely is an area of the world where paranormal is accepted as normal.
All right, let's. We got 3.5 minutes. Let's burn through a couple questions here. Yeah. Let's go to Mel WD40. Is there any connection with the constellations like Orion?
Yes. As a matter of fact, I just discovered that a couple of months ago, and I'm still trying to flush that out. I just bought Starry Sky, which is Starry Sky Pro, which is the software program where you can go back to year zero and look and see how the sky looked from a particular location. So I did find a drawing, a very, very large drawing, ancient drawing, off the beaten path. Tourists cannot even go there. And it is Orion. With completely Orion, and it looks like Orion is standing on the Milky Way. So, which is quite interesting. And so I'm still trying to do mapping and flush that out more. But yes, there is definitely a connection to Orion.
All right. And let's go over to Noble Patrick here. Did they have volcanic glass to make tools?
It's so funny you ask that because, in a recent archaeological excavation that occurred here 2 years ago over the summer, with these college kids on loan to the Archaeology Museum, they had all these artifacts, and they invited the public to come to the museum and help clean them with them. And so the one student archaeologist I had, we were in these breakout groups, and I asked her a million questions, and she said to me, "You know what's so crazy? We even found glass." So it's funny because I have found glass too, and you think to yourself, how is this possible? How? But yes, it seems that they were doing something with glass, and this is from the archaeologists as well. So that's a great question.
Okay, final question from our audience here, and I know it's been asked a couple of times, and that is about sea monsters. What are the legends of sea monsters around there?
So in a cave, there is a drawing of what I have it on my Facebook and I think on X as well. Of it looks to me like the Loch Ness monster. You can even see on the neck there are like spikes. And so I began to interview the fishermen as well, and they all said that they have seen something in the ocean, and they call it the long neck.
Oh wow. Is it like a dinosaur-like, or is it like serpent-like?
It seems to be like a dinosaur, like a plesiosaur. And interestingly enough, they have also been spotted in Venezuela by Angel Falls. So Venezuela is only 16 miles from here. And so if those creatures have been also spotted in Venezuela, northern Venezuela, which we're not far from, it's very easy to assume that they're also in the waters here of Aruba too. And the fishermen all speak of seeing them and saying that they're about the size of a car.
Oh, weird. 30 seconds left. Where can people find your research?
Yeah, so please follow me on Facebook, Heather L. Arnold. I have a page and a personal page. I post more on the personal page. I'm verified, so you should be able to find the right Heather L. Arnold. I'm on Instagram, Heather L. Arnold, and on X, Heather L. Arnold. And I post different things on all three platforms.
I love it. I love it. I want to say a big thank you for coming on Spaced Out Radio tonight. It has been an absolute pleasure, and we have to do this again. It was so much fun.
I'd love to do it again. Thank you so much, Dave.
All right, Heather Arnold, everybody. Coming up next, Swamp Dweller, and then Terry Hall and his beautiful mustache come in for the UFO/cryptid report.
You're listening to Spaced Out Radio with your host, Dave Scott.
That was amazing.
Oh, great. I loved it. Really enjoyed it.
Absolutely.
I'm so glad that you liked it.
I hope you enjoyed it too.
Yes, I did. It was excellent. I really had a good time. Great questions too.
Oh, the audience was amazing. Great questions, audience. Pat yourself on the back for that one. Heather,
yes.
I'm going to let you go, but thank you very much. And let's stay in touch. I added you on Facebook, by the way.
Okay, good. I'm going to add you too. Thank you so much, Dave. I appreciate it. Can't wait to be on again.
Awesome. Take care.
You too. Have a good night.
Good night. Be right back, everybody. And then Terry will be here with us. right. We got about a minute 45. Let's say hello to Terry Hall here. Little Terry Hall, how are you? Bring your microphone down.
I know I'm always on mute. How's Dave this evening?
I am good, man. That was a great interview.
I tell you what, that lady knows her stuff.
Oh my
Wow.
goodness, it was fantastic. I love surprises like that.
I know. That was pretty amazing. I'm kind of I learned a lot. I learned a lot. I never knew so much history in the islands like that. That's just amazing.
Mm-hmm. I agree with you. It was absolutely amazing. And kudos to Dirty Filth, our booking agent, for getting Heather Arnold. That was awesome. Just
Dirty
awesome.
pulled it off again, didn't he?
Mm-hmm. You know what? I love interviews like that where you are just so pleasantly surprised afterwards by the knowledge, by the research, and the way she spoke about the subject so eloquently. It's amazing.
That's what I'm going to watch a couple of times over. I'll tell you that much.
Absolutely. Hold on right there, Terry. Big thank you to Lenda, Lee ×2, CS, T-Bone, Steve, and Road Flare. Greatly appreciate the love. Don't forget you can shop at our Spaced Out Radio store. We do not have ugly swag, people. No ugly swag, so make sure you check it on out. And here we go, Swamp Dweller coming on up. Spaced Out Radio tonight. My name is Dave Scott. We always appreciate you tuning us on in wherever you are on this beautiful planet Earth. Hello to everyone listening in on our terrestrial affiliates around North America, digitally on every major podcast network. Our website, spacedoutradio.com. We have a plethora of features for you. Rock out to Bumblefoot, read the news wire, check out our swag as well. Follow us on X at Spaced Out Radio, Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show, and on Patreon in the Space Travelers Club. The Desert Clam has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club. Fainéant. Fainéant is your password. Use it wisely, Space Travelers, as the Clam sets the password each and every night right here on Spaced Out Radio. Let's head to the swamp.
Hello and welcome to Spaced Out Radio's Swamp. I'm Swamp Dweller, and tonight I'm going to take you on a mystic journey of the unknown, sharing tales of monsters, legends, and nightmares. Welcome to the Spaced Out Radio Swamp. About 10 years ago, I was a heavy drug user living in a medium-sized city with a very high crime rate in Alabama. I was staying with some fellow users in a rundown, seedy apartment in the ghetto, next to a halfway house. I'm also not some great big guy. I'm 5'6" and weigh 140 pounds now, and back then when this happened, I was barely breaking 100 pounds. Anyways, it was around 3 or 4 a.m. one night when I ran out of cigarettes. There was a 24-hour convenience store a couple of miles away from where we were staying, and I didn't have a ride at the time. So I figured I would just walk. I had gotten maybe a little over a quarter of a mile from the apartment when I heard a car creeping up behind me. I kept on walking, waiting for it to pass, but it kind of just idled slowly behind me. Now, as I said earlier, I wasn't in a very good life situation at the time and had either had dope or paraphernalia on me. So I was paranoid that at any second I would see blue lights or hear a siren and I would be busted. Finally, my curiosity got the best of me. I glanced around and saw that it was not a cop, but an older model Oldsmobile Cutlass. Alarms started going off in my head and I found myself suddenly wishing it were a cop. I started walking faster and the car pulled up beside me. I looked over and saw the passenger side window was down, and there looked to be two cracked out looking guys, probably in their late 30s or early 40s, just kind of watching me. I was just about to take off running through someone's yard when I looked over and saw a flash coming from the passenger side window. At first I thought I had gotten shot, but then it occurred to me that it was the flash of a camera. Before I could process what had just happened, To my relief, that car took off. My comfort was short-lived, though. A little way up the road, I saw that car had pulled up into a parking lot and parked facing me. I stopped in my tracks, looking at it and trying to decide what my next move should be. When I saw the car start to back out and head in my direction, across the road to my left, there was a cemetery surrounded by a wrought iron fence, which I first attempted to climb, but I couldn't make it over the sharp points at the top. So I jumped back down and ran across the road to an old abandoned field that used to be the local fairground. I had turned a corner before I jumped the chain link fence to get into the field, and fortunately the guy in the car didn't see which direction I went. I hunkered down in some tall grass and lay flat on my stomach for what seemed like forever, but was probably around a half an hour, just watching the car creep up and down the road. Eventually I quit seeing the car, and I assumed they had given up on me. So I got up and dusted myself off and called a friend to come pick me up. No way in hell was I going to risk running into them again. So my friend showed up and gave me a ride to the store. And on the way back, right past where the first car got behind me, I looked down this old driveway to an abandoned house, and sure enough, there was the Oldsmobile, just ominously sitting there. I never ran into those guys or saw that car again. But then again, I never really walked around after dark in that neighborhood again. I've racked my brain trying to figure out what their intention was and why they would take my picture, but I've never quite figured it out. If they hadn't been so cracked out looking, I would have considered they were just concerned citizens looking out for the neighborhood, since I too was extremely cracked out looking. But they were way too menacing for that to be the case, and if it was, why didn't they just call the cops? I'm also curious to see that photo, just as a reminder of how far down the gutter I was at the time, but not curious enough to seek those guys out. Anyways, thank you for sharing my story.
Thank you to Swamp Dweller for another creepy story. If you want more just like that, all you have to do is head on over to Swamp Dweller's YouTube channel, hit subscribe, ring that bell, and you got thousands of stories just like that, all free for you to listen to. All right, filling in for Lee Strauss is the beautifully mustached Terry Hall tonight, as we will be taking on a road of our own with cryptids, UFO, probably more UFO stuff tonight. Terry, how you doing, my friend? It is always good to see you, and thank you for coming on in.
Good to be here, Dave. Good to see you. How you doing this evening?
Good. Well, let's break down why Lee and Tim are not here tonight. They're on dates.
They are.
Dates. Of all the nights, they're on dates. You know?
And in typical men fashion,
Oh,
they have a date and they kind of forgot a previous engagement. I wonder which head they're thinking with.
oh, I don't know.
I
I don't know, man, but it is good. And you know what? I'm just going to say this to the public because, usually we keep the business side of SOR, pretty quiet as we build this through and through behind the scenes. But you have been working your butt off this past week in talking to radio stations, building up some energy around expanding SOR. And I just want to say a big thank you for the great work that you're doing behind the scenes to help build this show and make it grow a little bit more out there.
Well, Dave, it's important. I feel, and it's not just the way that I feel, it's the way that things are progressing now. More and more people are leaning towards independent news sources rather than, NBC, ABC, the standard old hacked up, dried up, politically twisted media. And when it comes to topics like this, it needs to be reported down the middle. Where you're in Canada makes a big difference. You're not Republican, you're not Democrat. We can't even call you a milquetoast fence sitter because you're neither one. So the kind of reporting that you do, where it's straight down the line, down the middle, and it's so varied, is important. With his with the way that this subject is progressing right now, where it's in the halls of our government, there's rumors that people like Lou Elizondo are getting meetings arranged with Trump. I mean, we need to move this forward. And the next big step for us is we're already on the radio. You've been a syndicated show. You've been doing this for over a decade now. So now it's time for us to expand a little bit further out and get this a little bit more widespread here on the radio. And I think it's important because independent news is the future. You're the future, Dave. We've just been building it for 10 years. Now it's ready to move forward.
I'm looking forward to it, man. And I know you've had some very good interest out there, and keep up the great work, Terry, behind the scenes. And, we need people like you moving the ball forward and believing in what we're doing here on a nightly basis. So thank you very, very much.
Well, that and to our terrestrial affiliates that we have now, thank you guys for spreading the word.
That's true. Very true. Thank you. We love our terrestrial affiliates. Yeah, man. I mean, Len and Chuck and Jody and Charlie and Ryan and all the guys who are having our radio stations elsewhere. It is fantastic. So thank you very, very much for doing that. All right, let's get to it here. I don't know if you heard the clip that Joe Rogan stated on his recent show with Jacques Vallée. And I'm going to paraphrase here, okay? And I think it's important, and maybe I still have it here, but I think it's important for what we were saying. And he says to Vallée, I think there's people that are grifters, and I think I probably had a few of them on. They are capitalizing on this desire that people have for stories. And we have talked behind the scenes about this quite a bit, but even on X and everything alike, every social media plan alike, I'm really starting to see, Terry, a trend towards people understanding that the last few years of this narrative that has been going on is becoming a tough pill to swallow. I know you have looked at it from behind the scenes because you're more behind the scenes of what we do, but just your thoughts of that all.
That in a sense, I have to agree with part of it, because in any industry, there's always going to be those people that are out there that are in it for a quick buck, want to be diva for a day, that kind of thing. But then again, on the other hand of that, if you didn't have those types that were willing to go on things like the Kardashians or whatever the case may be, this subject would stay stagnant. So with every good, there's bad, right, Dave? And we all know people who are in the know in this industry know that we have grifters in this industry, of course. That's been long-term, long-standing. That's been one of the problems in this industry is the grifters. But without the grifters, it's almost like you have to sum it up like this. Without the good, you wouldn't know bad. And without the bad, you wouldn't know good. So the grifters, yeah, they're out there. A lot of them you see on network television. I mean, let's just be plain and simple and speak truth here this evening. A lot of them you see on network TV, you see on Netflix. And it's going to be rife right now with a lot of things like that because the subject is getting more and more, not just popular, but the question is starting to be answered. When that happens, you're going to have all the new documentaries and all the new films and all the new people coming out saying, well, I'm a whistleblower here, I'm a whistleblower there. We got to keep in mind that keep your sense of skepticism open. Don't be skeptics. Don't be a skeptic to the point to where you turn a hard heart towards this. But always keep a skeptical eye. use your perception, and you can figure out what's true and what's not. Now, the longer this subject goes on, the easier these people are going to be to spot. Um, and the more people that get educated about this, the more people are going to be able to spot the grifters. So the grifters don't bother me. What bothers me about it is they take people's true heartfelt beliefs and try to make $1 off of it. That's the part of it that bothers me. How about you?
I think there's a lot of disclosure for dollars. And this is where it kind of happens. We've been preaching about the disclosure for dollars for a couple of years now on this show. And beware of who you're supporting. Beware of the big names that are out there trying to get into your pockets or start this, as we've called it, the threat narrative that we have seen going on for a long time on this field. And I think it's dangerous. I really do. I mean, look, there are people within that category of the community that still need to be interviewed by shows like ours. They may be controversial. There's going to be people who believe them, and there's going to be people who make accusations about them. But our job is to tell their story. That's what we do here. And I think, though, that we're seeing over the last year and a half, 2 years especially, these cliques form where they are protecting themselves. They are, making sure that they are protected by who they speak to, who they are being interviewed by, and it's the people on the outside of those cliques that are the ones going on the podcasts or going on the YouTube channels, going on the radio shows. And I think, as I stated in my Dave 101 recently, the medium is the message. And if you control the media, you control the message. And that's definitely what we are seeing at this point. The good news about that is there is a strong, small stable of people in the UFO community who are calling those out, who are calling out the bad actors, who are doing this. And I hate the term grifting, that. So I'm not going to use that term, but they are out there trying to expose what these people are doing. And look, there's good people involved. Give you an example, like Jake Barber. People are crapping on him, not so much about the egg video, but they're crapping on him because of the summoning of UFOs, the CE5, the heist. You know people who have done it. I know people and myself have done it.
Yeah.
It is possible. But there's this diatribe out there of people who think just because the government hasn't given us a good video or good evidence that everything is garbage, everything is a lie, everything is a grift, everything is impossible. And I don't believe in that.
I
And
have a counterpoint to that, though, Dave.
fire away.
I don't think it's that the government hasn't given us a proper video, even though that is part of it. What people are growing weary of, and what I've grown weary of, are stories without any substance behind them. No way, no proof, no way to prove what you're saying, or the type of people that are coming out and saying, I have all this proof, but are refusing to put it forward. We have metamaterial, we have this, we have that, but I have an NDA, I can't talk about it. We've heard that since 2017 now. That's what I've grown weary of.
I'm worried about that too, and weary about that. This is why I think it's more important than ever that people come out and talk about their experiences.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. People talk about their alien encounters, their UFO close encounters, their summoning, their experiences with Bigfoot or Dogman or ghosts or anything along those lines. I mean, that's the conversation that we need to be having on a full-term scale, that this is happening to real people and not just government military workers or agents that are, trying to become a so-called whistleblower. Just because you have an experience at a military base, in my opinion, doesn't make you a whistleblower. You're an experiencer.
Well, over the last, say, let's just round it out. Let's just say over the last 12 months, even on things like network news, this evening, for instance, Dave, in Bellingham, did you see that little clip from Bellingham this evening?
No.
Someone was taking video of the blood moon yesterday evening, and UFO went right across the screen. It was just shink right across the screen on network news. How many times have we seen that in the last year? This is becoming more and more. The sightings are becoming more and more frequent again, like back in '75 and then prior to that, where the public can move this forward. With just the people that you and I know, with all the people that we know that have videos of these things, can you imagine what the populace has? I mean, there's so many of these videos and things out now. I think we've gone past the question of, are we alone in the universe? Now it's to the point of the nuts and bolts. Okay, we know they're here. How are they getting here? What are they driving? What kind of power plant are they using? How are they able to navigate? How can they get around? Are they interdimensional? I mean, so that's where we're at. Now, at least that's how I feel. We know there's USOs. There's something in the water. There's something in our skies. It's been proven over and over and over again. So as far as disclosure goes, that part of it, as far as my heart is concerned, is satisfied. So now what's the next step? And the next step is the big one. That's going to be delving into governments and religion and just our day-to-day life. And where I'm getting hung up with any government is as a government, how do you present that without just breaking the planet?
Breaking the planet. I would say the cover-up is breaking the planet.
Well, the cover-up's been going on for 100 years now. It hasn't broken the planet yet.
Well, it's because of the popularity of the subject, though. It is starting to break the trust. That's for sure.
I think it lies more in you're talking about dollars now. And
Yes.
I think that's where it's broken down to. It's dollars now. If we have the type of technology that, let's say our alien friends decide that they're going to share their technology with us. They feel that we've progressed enough as a planet to share this technology. What's it going to do to economies around the world when we don't have to pay for electricity anymore? Or we don't have to put tires on our car, or we don't need to pump oil out of the ground to do our day-to-day life, even though that everything we touch has oil in it anymore. But I think it's breaking down to the dollars, and of course the whole military-industrial complex. If they can, I mean, I think that's the reason why they didn't go with Tesla Tech back in the day, because if he could have, he had his death ray, there wouldn't have been any more wars because you couldn't get close to the country. So it's a whole big ball of wax with this anymore now. It's not just as simple as, are they here or not? We're past that. Now we're to the point of, okay, here comes legislation. Who's going to make the dollars on it? How much of this stuff are they going to dole out? What's it going to do to us as a world? Because, like Reagan said, the one thing that could bring the entire world together is an invasion from off-world. Maybe we're finally going to get to the point to where we're not Americans and Canadians, and maybe we're just going to be Earthlings. Wouldn't that be a treat?
Never know, Terry. We're going to continue the chat right after this on Spaced Out Radio. Terry Hall in for the report. Great show we have going on tonight. We're going to finish it off the final half hour right after this.
Out Radio, and your host, Dave Scott.
All right, Terry, we're clear.
Oh,
Lots of fun, man.
have you seen Twitter's been blowing up for the last couple of hours? Did you see what's going on Twitter, Dave?
No, I've been kind of busy.
Representative Burleson. We'll talk about it. But anyway, Representative Burleson, this guy Matt Lazon was talking to Representative Burleson on the floor today about David Grush and the UFO community they got going on right now.
Well, bring that up when we come back on the air. Let's not talk about it now. Bring it up on the air, because that's where we'll save it. That'll make for some good radio. Good job, 2-month man.
Yeah, this week's been a lot of fun. I tell you what, Dave, radio people are some neat people. I've talked to a lot of really cool people this week.
1 second here, Terry. DOG and Firestar, same person. You don't come in to my chat room and start dominating and telling people and talking about raping children and everything like that. Okay, you're done. If you want to chat and have some fun, that's what this chat room is for. Otherwise, we don't need you. All right, we don't need you. I don't know who took you out on the first one, but I just took you out on the second. And before you make comments about our chat room, learn what we are, what we do around here. We're a very open, good group of people. We come here to relax and enjoy the evening after being pounded and inundated with stories all night long, or with politics and garbage all day long. This is a relaxed time. You're more than welcome to come back, but just tone it down.
Yeah, Spaced Out's always been a landing place for people like us.
Vanessa, how are you?
I remember when I first found Spaced Out Radio. It was such a relief. Finally have a place where I could sit and talk with people who've been through things that I've been through. It's kind of nice.
Some people just got to get mad about everything. I don't understand why.
Well, hopefully they'll take this opportunity to just catch their breath and come back fresh and join the crowd.
Hopefully.
We hold a lot of things here at Spaced Out, but we don't hold grudges.
Right. Totally true.
I mean, I would imagine if you took a poll, a lot of the people that are in this chat would say that SOR is family. At least that's how I feel.
Oh, I hear you. We do our best.
Now I'm caught up reading the chats, and just like you said, SOR's family.
Uh-huh.
You guys are great.
All right, big thank you tonight to Road Flare, Steve, Linda, Lee times 2, T-Bone, and CS. Thank you for the absolute great love, support with your super chats tonight. Slow Motion, how you doing? Andrew, careful. The trucker's grift can be rough on the roads. You don't want to blow a tire. Hey, Andrew, are you going to Nebraska Bigfoot Conference again? Will I get to see you there? Let me know in the chat. All right, here we go in like 10 seconds, Terry. Let's go to the final half hour of Spaced Out Radio tonight. Good to have you with us. My name is Dave Scott. We always appreciate your listening ears wherever you are on this beautiful planet we call Earth. Reminder to all of you that if you missed most of this show or others, you can check out our free archives on YouTube or any major podcast network. Our website, spacedoutradio.com. We have a plethora of features for you. Rock out to Bumblefoot, read the news wire, check out our swag as well. Follow us on X at Spaced Out Radio, Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show, and on Patreon in the Space Travelers Club. We have Terry Hall in here for the report, hanging on out with us. And Terry, you were talking about during the break, there was a big upheaval a little bit on X about the UFOs. What do you got for us?
Well, apparently there was someone named Matt Laszlo that was on the floor today, and he ran across Representative Merrill, what was his name? Oh, it's Burleson. Merrill Burleson. That's what it is. Anyhow, they were talking about the whole UFO discovery team that they've got going on right now and how they've got 6 months to go. But a name that was brought up was David Grush. David Grush's name was brought up. And Mr. Laszlo asked Representative if he was going to take someone like Grush and apply him to the team. And you were talking about money earlier. Apparently, that if they were going to do something like that, they had planned on doing that already. They had talked to James Comer, who is the House Oversight Committee. He's head of the House Oversight Committee, about David Grush and bringing him into something like this. But apparently, the budget isn't there for it quite yet. So, talks are now to extend the original 6 months. The next time they go up into a meeting, they're going to be requesting more funds to extend this UFO discovery tour that they've got. But now they're talking about bringing people like David Grush and the like in on the committees with them. Not just being on the outside looking in, but actually being on the inside, being able to do something.
Well, I think that's a big question that many in the UFO community have right now is what has happened to David Grush? Where did he go? Why has he gone absolutely silent? Now, we know he's helping with the new movie about UFOs that Steven Spielberg is coming out with. He's apparently going to be a consultant there. He has apparently no top secret clearance anymore, so he can't work for the government. But prior to coming public, he was a realtor in Colorado. And we do know that he was sitting in on secret conversations between the members of the Canadian government and Lou Elizondo and Chris Mellon. He was sitting quietly in the background. I mean, he has been playing this game, but I don't know whether it's because of the threats that were made against him. Okay, because we do know, and I've talked to people behind the scenes, that he did have death threats, not just from the agents and agencies within the government who are saying shut up about this or something's going to happen, but there were a lot of wingnuts on social media going after him and trying to dox where he lived, where his wife lived or where his wife worked, their address, their town, their relatives, everything like that. And it's amazing, what the community itself put him through. I mean, I couldn't imagine what it would be like finding if somebody, out there who absolutely despised me found my address and my phone number and started, making text messages or phone calls to people that surround me. I mean, that would be absolutely horrific. And I could understand if that is the case, but this David Grush has been the perfect example of a hit and run. He comes in, swings a big bat for a few months, he hits 350 at the plate and then disappears.
Yep. Yep. There's another, I'm not exactly sure to say how to say this. I don't know if it's rumor or if it's actual fact, but it is another thing that's going around right now. Apparently, Mr. Danny Sheehan, who is legal representation for Lou Elizondo, has let it leak that there is apparently going to be a meeting between our current administration and Lou Elizondo. Not to a meeting, but an actual sit-down meeting with President Trump.
Well, that meeting, I believe, was with Junior. That's coming up.
Oh, is it with Don Jr.?
Yeah, Don Jr. was
actually he's already done Don Jr.'s podcast before.
Yes.
So I think that this time it's not Don Jr. It's actually the Don. The Donald.
I read that it was Junior.
Okay.
So, I mean, but you might be right. I mean, there's a lot going on right now regarding this, and I think, I think it's tough for any of us to really know what is going on regarding this subject politically, because
I'm sorry, Dave. Go ahead. My apologies.
No problem, because it is something that is, loosely associated with the current government in the United States, especially Don Jr.'s love of this subject. So, I mean, could I see that conversation happening? Absolutely, I could.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely, 100%. But
well, once again, this thing with Burleson brings up a whole the point on the subject is it's breaking down to budgets again. They discussed bringing people on, but then they also discussed we don't have the budget for that. And when you're thinking about whistleblowers, when they come forward, they're doing it out of a sense of need or want? Are they doing it to make that money? Are they doing it to move the needle forward because their conscience is telling them to? And then once they're in something like this, like you said, David Grush came forward and was batting 350 and then disappeared. How is he supposed to live his day-to-day life? I mean, you can't be you can't be on TV constantly. You can't be out there in the forefront constantly. So once you come forward with your story, what more is there to do with it?
I have an answer for you. And I'm going to go back in time here in a conversation that I had with Lou Elizondo. Okay, and this wasn't on the air. This was in a phone conversation. And one of the things he told me prior to him coming on this show for the first time was that one of the biggest mistakes the To the Stars Academy made was that they ignored the UFO field. You have millions of people, and yes, there are millions of us who believe in this subject. Okay. Are we a small percentage of the population? Sure. But still millions of people who are involved in this topic, who love this topic, whether they have interest, whether they've had a sighting, whether they've had an experience, whether they've been abducted, millions of people in North America alone. And one of the things that Elizondo stated was that the biggest mistake that the To the Stars Academy made was that they did not include the UFO community. And all of that support that they could have got. They went in strong. They were begging for money, because they were crowdfunding for everything they wanted to do, including the multi-billion-dollar spaceship they were going to build. And they ended up with like $5 million. And so what did they do? They pulled away from the UFO community. Nobody in the UFO community got interviews outside of George Knapp. Nobody got interviews with Tom DeLonge. Nobody got interviews with Elizondo before he left. Nobody got Chris Mellon. Nobody got any of them. Nobody. And Elizondo to this, and I don't know if he still thinks about it to this day. When we get a chance to talk to him again, I'd like to ask him that. But he said the biggest regret or mistake they made was they bit the hand that fed them. And here you have instantaneous support. People who are going to go to the nth degree to support your cause, to support your word, to support your drive. And they basically said, nah, we don't need you. Now, Elizondo, Mellon, and who is the other one that left? The guy from Lockheed Martin. His name skips my mind right now. Steve Justice. Steve Justice. Okay. When they left, what did Elizondo do? He made it up to all those shows that he didn't even know that were asking for him to participate. Mm-hmm. He was blown away when I told him that we had put in 15 requests to have an interview with him. 15. And he never, according to him, and I'm going to take him at his word, he said he never got one. Yeah. John Greenwald from the Black Vault had the same issue with it. Other shows had the same issue with it. Okay. Jimmy Church never got him back until after he left TTSA. Linda Moulton Howe, same thing. Okay. And these are good people who've been in the business a long time. Now you fast forward to Apology today, and we're seeing the exact same thing. How much more support would David Grush have if he did the tour of the shows? I'm not saying you have to go on every show. Go on a few. Because there are thousands of shows. How do you choose? Yeah, there are thousands of shows on this topic. Mm-hmm. You have shows that have 1 million subscribers. You have shows out there with 800 subscribers. How do you choose? Well, reputation, word of mouth. We're not that hard to find. And I'm not even saying they have to come on SOR. Not even saying that. Will we try? Sure. If we got lucky, let's do it. Okay. But we don't have that. And today's Apology, they don't care about this. This subject has grown beyond the wide range of support that they have. And Terry, I think it's never good when you turn your back on blind support and people who want to give you their time.
Oh, I'm not arguing that not at all. Zero, none. You'll never get any pushback on me like that. But I mean, even the old guy that we have up on the hill, Mr. Bassett himself, has come out here recently and said, it's ripe right now. This subject is ripe, and the grapes are ready to be picked. And we're going to see a lot of this stuff that's coming out. We were talking about grifters and disclosure for dollars. That's going to be very popular here. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. But at least with that side of it, they don't look the UFO community. They don't look the gift horse in the mouth. They play to us. But you got to stop and think when you're coming out to be a whistleblower. Anything you're doing in the public anymore, when you're coming out and coming forward, you're going to have people tear your entire life apart. That's just part of the deal. Mm-hmm. we've talked privately before on if Grush was another guinea pig. They they pushed Elizondo out the door to see how that one went. That one went okay. Then they pushed David Grush out the door. And I think it was within 24, 48 hours, we knew that man's entire history. He'd had alcohol problems. He'd had problems with, some psychological issues and things like that. And that became the story. It wasn't that all this amazing things that he was telling us, that became the story. It was him, his personal life became more of a story than what he was trying to relay to us. And so when we have people that come out, even if it is about an egg-shaped UFO, they're being brave enough to put themselves forward. And so we have to at least give them enough grace to listen to what they have to say. We can leave our discerning ear open. We can leave our skeptical eye open, but at least listen to what they have to say.
Yeah, we're in the judging. We're not in the listening game anymore.
Mm-hmm.
We're not in the listening game. And, I look at, a prime example of that I'm bringing up again is Jake Barber with the psionics.
Mm-hmm.
And, you see people like Stephen Greenstreet absolutely going after him in the New York Post and on X. You see them absolutely going, lumping everybody in one basket. You can't do that. This subject is too convoluted. And if you really pay attention and understand what the phenomena is, it's too convoluted to throw everybody in one basket.
I'm not trying to play psychologist here with Greenstreet, because Stephen was a gung-ho 100% supporter, full truth believer, or full believer, I shouldn't say truth believer, but full believer. And then all of a sudden one day his light switch just got turned off. And he went from believer to an over-the-line skeptic, I would say. And that's really easy to do today. And I've said it before, and I've said it during this show, as a matter of fact, that when you take someone's heartfelt belief and you try to make $1 off of it, it leaves a bad taste in your mouth. And so with people like Greenstreet, you've got that side of it. You've got this side of it where you've got somebody like you, Dave, who just tells the story and lets people make up their own mind about it, just presenting the facts. I think that's where we should be. Present the facts. Let us make up our own mind about it. Let us be discerning. Let's not look for the personal side of this. Let's look for the factual side of this. And that's why I think the public is so important.
Yeah. And you also have to have a modicum of understanding that I think with Greenstreet, now I think I'm finally starting to figure him out, and people like him. They believe that there is a phenomena. They believe that there are UFOs. They believe that there is something going on. But, and I'm not saying I agree with his reporting or especially his antics on X. Okay, it makes me kind of uncomfortable, but that's his style. That's his way. He's allowed to do it. That's what freedom of speech is. I don't have to agree with it. I don't have to like it, but he's allowed. He's completely allowed to do that. But I think I'm starting to get it. I don't think he's in denial that things are happening, Terry. I think what he's trying to do is poke fun at those that are trying to pull the wool over the public's eyes. That's what I believe.
Being in places that I've been, Dave, and seeing things that I've seen, I know that a lot of what we see on TV is stagecraft. It's straight up stagecraft. They set the scenes, they block them, they shoot them. Quiet on the set, nobody talk, be quiet over there. That doesn't mean that this isn't real, but in order for them to have their weekly viewership, they got to leave the cliffhangers. In order to leave the cliffhangers, they have to tell the story. To tell the story, you're getting away from truth. And I think at least that's my thoughts on people like Green Street. It's the story's real. I mean, the base of the story is true. It's real. It's the way they're telling the story and how they're presenting the story, I think, that upsets him the most. And in some instances, I agree with him. I mean, I don't necessarily kin to Stephen Greenstreet, but in some of the way he looks at some things, I'm in total agreement from what I've seen personally. From what I've seen personally.
And that could be very well it. As we got about 2 minutes to go here before we have to say goodnight to this beautiful show that we call Spaced Out Radio. And I just want to see more transparency. And I think we're going to get it more with people coming out and telling their amazing encounters and stories. Because like many I'm talking to, and you look at Science Bob, who the other night was saying that he believes that disclosure is dead. This is a guy who is waving the disclosure flag faster and harder than anybody. That we're getting it. It's coming. It's right around the corner. And guess what? He's now to the point where he doesn't believe it's happening. And many others within the community don't believe it's happening. We may get something. We're going to get confirmation, but we're not getting disclosure. And, I don't
Bingo.
want to feel bad about that, but I just want to make sure that our people aren't played, Terry.
Amen to that. And confirmation right now, I think, is all we're going to achieve. But we've done this too many times with these congressional teams and this, that, and the other. And we wait for these to come out. We wait for the report with bated breath. And when it comes out, we go, well, been here before. Let's just hope that doesn't happen again. Let's hope that they really do declassify some of this stuff that they've been classifying for such a long time. That'll open this subject up enough for us to make some moves forward with it. But like,
right.
But once again, Science Bob, I can't argue with the guy. Can't argue with him because he's smarter than me.
Thank you for filling in and saying goodnight to Terry. Rocking in the background with little brother who's watching. Rocking us in and out of every single show. Get your horns up, guitar, God himself. Special thanks to everybody listening at work, at home, wherever you may be. Thank you to everyone on our channel. YouTube, Twitch, Elgin, Facebook, LinkedIn, Space Travelers, and on X, hashtag Space Out Radio.
I know you're out there somewhere.
Remember, this show is copyright by Space Out Radio and Sport Media Ventures Limited. Thank you so much for choosing to be with us. Because together, my
don't
friends,
make a mistake. We're watching.
we own the dials. Mr. We need a favor.
You to fall.
We need you to take us
you
home.
all. I know you're out there somewhere. Watching me.
Yes, the Blue Train has gone for the night. Soon, my friends, we shall ride again. Your seats are always filled. Your tickets never expire. And if you want to bring a friend, we've got room for them too. Good night, everybody. All right, we are clear.
The absolute best chat family on planet Earth is right here. You guys are awesome.
Happy
It's so
Father's Day,
nice.
everybody.
I mean, every time I come in, I can see Lovey Love and Tim and Mel, and it's just like, family reunion every night. This is home.
Kind of cool, isn't it?
It's past cool. It's very past cool. Well, Dave, are you going to go out to the gifting spots this weekend?
No, but I tell you what I am going to do, because I just washed my Jeep.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm probably going to take the little guy out and go find some puddles.
Yeah. There
Yeah.
we go. That sounds like a blast. I mean, you might as well live up being a Canadian before you end up being American in the 51st state, Dave.
Or 11th province. Your 11th province.
Oh wait, that could work too. I mean, hey, Canadian. I could wrap my head around that.
Right? It's all good. It's all good.
Buddy, we live in a very strange world. That's why it's always nice to be able to come here. Well, guys, I am signing off. Dave, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
You're the best, buddy. I'll give you a call.
And
Okay.
sounds like a plan. Good night, all. Have a wonderful rest of your evening and a
tip my cap to you.
wonderful weekend.
Tip my cap to you.
Ciao for now, all.
See you, buddy. Terry Hall, everybody. Dave would love to go to Texas. All right, let me finish this up here. All right, there we go. There we go. All right. Give me 2 seconds. All right, cool. Give me 2 seconds here. All right, everybody. Thank you tonight to Linda, Steve, Road Flare, Lee times 2, T-Bone, and CS for the great super chats. Very much appreciate your love and support. This weekend, Sweet Robbie G is here for Saturday, Sunday night, starting at 8 p.m. Pacific, 11 p.m. Eastern. I will be back on Monday with, who's this? Joan of Angels. What are we talking about? Shaping your spiritual and destiny. Dr. Joan of Angels. Something tells me that might not be her real name. That might be her stage name. But you guys have a great weekend. I'll tip my cap to you. Appreciate you coming on in, and we'll see you soon. Have a great weekend, everybody.
Stay healthy, my friend.
You too.
If you need bail money, give me a call.
Always, Dad. Take care.
You too.